All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started with the formal part of our meeting, and that is all about Intune. And I'm delighted that Paul reached out and offered to go over this topic with us, and at such a late hour where he is. So hopefully we'll be entertaining enough. You know, I think I'll speak for Paul, but he wants to know what your questions are and such. So help keep him awake. And Paul, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because I don't know that much about you yet. You may be on mute. We can't hear you, Paul. There we go. Try now. Nope, still can't hear you. Still can't hear you, Paul. Up. Oh, 1 minute. Not a problem.
Paul, if you can hear, there is a gearbox icon that I had to go into to change some of the audio settings from what Teams loaded up by default. So that may be a problem.
All right. So Brent's got something interesting up here. The domain functional level needs to be 2016 R2. I've not heard that before.
I was looking on just on the docs just now. I'm like, I haven't seen that or heard that.
We're suspicious, us Microsofties.
For Intune, average one.
Right. So if you're domain joined and Azure AD joined.
Maybe for it to write back.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Brent, how did you discover it?
Hello?
Hey, Paul, we can hear you.
Hi, okay, right.
And you sound great.
Let me try again. Okay. I'm going to share the screen. Let me know if I drop off at all. Can you hear me now?
We can. And you're not
Okay.
loud and clear here.
Cool. Okay. You can't beat tech, can you? Fingers crossed, because if I fall out at all here, it's just completely pointless because you're going to have to listen to me talk, and being muted is not great. Okay, yeah, well, thanks initially, Julie, for having me as well at the user group today. Yeah, my name's Paul Winstanley. I'm a config manager consultant. I've been working with config manager for over 10 years now. Started off initially with config manager 2007. I've got 25 years plus of IT experience, you know, going right back to Windows 3.1 days and doing deployments and project work, etc. But config manager is my thing really, and I've started to look at Intune. Intune's new to me. I'm getting used to all the features here, so I'm kind of working on this. Customers are starting to get interested in cloud and Intune, so it's good to kind of get used to the feature set that Intune offers. As you can see, I'm a Microsoft MVP. Have been now for 2 years in the Enterprise Mobility Program. And that's my Twitter handle at SCCM Mentor. as you can see, there's only one M. That's not a mistake. That's my attempt to do a Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, Brangelina type thing. So it's SCCM Mentor, it's pronounced, but just the one M. Okay, so hopefully you can still hear me. Yeah, is that all good?
Sound great.
Fantastic. Right, okay, let's crack on then. Okay, so what's on the agenda today? I've got 4 topics that I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to start off by doing a bit of a deep dive on Win32 app deployment in Intune. I didn't actually mention what the title of the piece is, so let me go back. It's Intune cloud features that are bridging the on-prem gap. So this is talking about features that help us to move into Intune, and there were features that were lacking previously, and we were kind of used to in our on-prem environments. So yeah, deploying Win32 apps via Intune, a new feature that's been out since about September last year. Then we'll be talking, or I'll be talking about endpoint encryption features and improvements that have happened recently, particularly around Windows 10 1809. I'll then move into some discussion around applying security baselines via Intune. And then to cap off, I'll be doing a bit of a deep dive on the new on-premise domain join feature that's been introduced recently in preview mode and is available for Windows 10 1809 devices as well. Just a note, I had a bit of a laugh with these slides. To keep myself entertained, I've put little quirky things on the slide, so you'll see these as we go along, just to keep myself awake whilst I was creating PowerPoint slides. Okay, so Win32 app deployment in Intune. Let me run through the prereqs initially that are needed for this. So you'll need Windows 10 version 1607 as a minimum. And as you can see, SKU-wise, it's Enterprise, Pro, or Education. Devices will need to be either Azure or hybrid AD joined. They'll need to be enrolled in Intune as well. And it's worth noting that at the moment, Win32 app size is capped at a maximum of 8 gig. So I won't be demoing any kind of AutoCAD deployment tonight. Okay, so how do we get our applications into Intune? Well, we need to convert the apps that we have into a format that Intune can ingest. And to do this, we use the Microsoft Win32 content prep tool. You can do a search for that and you'll find it in a GitHub page, and you can download that tool, and that tool will help you get your applications into the format for Intune to use. As you can see there, they'll be converted into a .intune Wim extension. So it's a really simple tool to use. It's a command line tool. And if you run the Intune WinApp util.exe with a /h, you'll get a list of all the parameters that you can assign for your conversion. And I'll just run through those. The -c switch will require you to point to your setup folder. So this is the folder that's going to contain all your files for the setup files for the Win32 app itself. There's a -s switch, which you'll point towards the actual installation file. So this could be a .exe or an MSI file, but you'll need to shout that one out. The -o switch will be where the .intune win file will be outputted to. So you'll need to state the output folder there. And you can run this in quiet mode by using the -q parameter. So there's no fun in using the -q because you don't see what's going on in the background. So on this particular example, I've not used it, and you can get the full gist of what's going on. So you can see here, I've issued the switches. The -s is pointing to an MSI file. This particular application is a music coding app that I enjoy using called Sonic Pi. And I'm going to dump it into an output an output folder called output. As it runs through the conversion, you'll see here that it compresses the source folder. So that's the -C folder that we specified. And it dumps it into it compresses the source folder and dumps it into a content subfolder and puts all that content into this .intune win file. Next up, it will encrypt the file itself. Then it will compute a SHA-256 hash file.
So we have a question in the chat real quick. Will it create the folder when you use the O parameter, or do you have to have that folder there before you run the command?
Can you just repeat that again, Julie? Oh, shall I look at the? Yeah. Go on.
And it's hard to present and look at the chat. So
yeah.
if you have the -O
yeah.
parameter, does that create the folder for you that you specify, or do you need to have that created before that?
That's a good question, actually. I've not tried it. I've always created the folder first. So I don't know if that will prompt you or if it will just go ahead and create it. So I can't say for sure.
Okay.
Okay, so yep, next up it will generate a detection XML file. You can see here at the top of the command prompt window. And it will dump that into a metadata subfolder. Now that detection XML file will be used to get some of the information for the application when we import that into the portal. Finally, it will take all that information and compress that folder with the intune.win and the XML file, and it will wrap that up into a final intune.win file. There you go, it's the last command there at the bottom. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to hop onto a VM. Let me just fire that up. Okay. Okay, so here's the Intune win file that I created. Hopefully you can see that on screen okay. And if I fire up a compression application, I can extract the contents of that intune.win file out. So let me do that. And you can see in here, under the Intune win package folder, we've got the two subfolders that I mentioned, the contents and the metadata folders. Here's the detection XML file. And if I pop that open in Notepad, I can see a lot of information that's been collated in there, MSI product code, for example, and that will be used when I upload the application into the portal. It's worth noting that the actual Intune win file, because that's been encrypted, I can't actually go in there and extract that out again. So if I try and do that, I get an error. Now, luckily, a clever enterprise mobility MVP, a chap called Oliver Keiselbach, has created a little tool which we can use to actually extract back that data from the Intune win file. And you could use that if, for example, you've lost the original source MSI files or whatever, and you need to get those back so you can use them again in the future. So I'll demo that little tool. If you do, the link to his blog is actually on the slides, but you can do a search for his blog with this information in it. But let me just crack that open. So the actual file itself is this Intune Win App Util Decoder utility, which is just an executable. Okay. So let me do that. So it's really simple. Just take the executable file, point it to your Intune Win file. You can issue a /s at the end if you want, but for purposes of the demo, I'll leave that off. Now that's extracted the information. It asked me if I want to clean up those extracted files or not. Let me just hop in here. Where have I extracted that to? Okay, it's in here. Here we go. So here's the extracted folder. If I just clean that up, that gets rid of it for me, but it's created this .decoded file. And now I can go into my WinZip tool or WinRAR tool, highlight that, extract. And there we go. So I can recover the MSI. I could use that again if I wanted to repackage or anything like that, and I've lost the original source file. So quite a cool little utility that Oliver's created there. Okay. Okay, so what next? Well, we've got the converted file ready for consumption. So I need to create the application itself in the Azure portal. Once I create it, I need to upload my Intune Win file and then go through a process of setting and configuring that. I can set detection methods, I can configure the install commands, I can target specific OS architectures, and I can target particular Windows 10 baselines as well. Okay, so when I deploy the actual application, something called the Intune Management Extension Agent will handle that for me. And this particular extension is helping to supplement the inbox Windows 10 MDM features and extend that so we can use some of the more legacy style items such as Win32 apps, but also we can push out PowerShell scripts or whatever. The first time we deploy something, the Intune Management Agent will install as part of that process. The great thing is that it will also generate logs for us. So whenever we do deploy Win32 apps, we can look at the Intune Management Extension log. As you can see there, there's the path to where that log exists, which is the Program Data Microsoft Intune Management Extension logs folder. And if you're fans of Config Manager, like I am, then I can use cmtrace to open that up and take a look. When we do deploy, the agent itself has got some default values for retry and execution. It will attempt a maximum of 3 retries to install the app with an interval of 5 minutes between each retry. And there's also a maximum execution runtime of 60 minutes before it times out. After this process, then there's something called the global retry schedule, which will retry every 24 hours to get the app onto the device. The great thing for the lovers of peering technology is that Win32 apps are delivery optimization enabled. You must be running Windows 10 1709 and above for this. And you can manage delivery optimization either via GPO config manager, but now you can manage it via Intune MDM. So I'm just going to zoom in here, hopefully see that. And here's the choices when you create a delivery optimization profile in Intune. So you get the choice of a download mode. It's usually recommended to use what's called group mode, which is the one I've specified there. It isn't actually written as group mode. They describe it in a different way here in Intune. And group ID, which you use to sort of section off different parts of your environment so that peering can occur within those. So you've got the choice of using such things as AD site or DHCP options, etc. And then you've got a few other options around delaying background and foreground HTTP downloads as well, and caching sizes, for example. Okay, so a little bit of toast. What does this mean? Well, the features of Win32 apps are changing all the time. There's been lots of additions and amendments to this along the way. And I've highlighted toast notifications. These are kind of things that we're used to seeing with app deployment in Config Manager. And toast notifications themselves were introduced at the end of January this year. But we've had features like delivery optimization introduced post the initial deployment of Win32 apps. DO, for example, was added in November. There are still some features that are lacking in Win32 apps. For example, there's no dependency support. However, that's on its way. It's in development, and I think it's going to be previewing this month. And there's no supersedence, and there's no kind of ordered installations, for example. So if you want to order installations, then you'd have to take dependency support into account, possibly, and chain that way. Not ideal. You could have a big chain of events, but it gives you some kind of structure to order your installations. Okay, it's demo time. So let's run a demo. Now I played it pretty safe. These are pre-recorded. Nothing can go wrong, surely. Okay, so I'm going to run through the whole process, go through the conversion, show you how that Intune Win file is uploaded into Azure, the app's configured, and then deployed down to a device. Okay, so here's that conversion process. It's pretty quick. It's quite nifty. This is about 150 meg MSI file, and it blitzes through it very, very quickly indeed. Job done. Okay, created. So I can take that Intune Win file, and I can go into the portal and create my app. So under Intune, I go into my app section, and I can add a new application. When I do, hold on, jumped ahead there. Start that again. Okay. Okay. So note there that when I go in and add the application, I have to choose a Windows app Win32 type. Select my converted application. And now I go through a process of configuring that application. So it's picked up some information here from the XML file. Just going to populate that a little bit more. Here I can select an image, as you might have seen on previously there, there's a PNG file. That's what will appear on the company portal, for example, if you publish that as an available application. Here we've got the program installation and uninstallation commands, which I can go in and manipulate. And as I mentioned, you can choose architecture type, baselines. You can go in and specify disk requirements or memory. Detection rules. Well, if you're a config manager admin who deploys out application, the application by the application model, you'd be used to this kind of thing, where we can go in and specify the existence of files or registry values or whatever. MSI is another option, and here it's ingested the MSI product code. So if that already exists, it won't attempt to install the application. Cool. Once that's done, that's all the required options set. The Intune Win file will now upload, and I can assign that out. So I've created a group here for my devices where I want that to install, and I'm going to push that out as a required deployment. There you go. There's the toast notification stuff. So I'm going to select to show all notifications for that particular deployment. Okay, so on the end device, you can see there, very familiar toast notification showing that it's actually downloading and starting to install the software for us. And here's that Intune management extension log that I mentioned. And we can get information from that as to whether things are working or not. Here we've got it processing the application. It's going through and doing a bit of extraction out into a staging area for us. And there it's starting to execute the MSI. So if I take a look on the device, I can confirm that the application is starting to appear and things are happening in the background. And there's the Sonic Pi app being created in the program files folder. Now I've got a notification, it's successfully installed. And there we go, the recently added application. So that's working. Everything's great. So that's Win32 apps in a nutshell. There's a bunch of references here for you to take a look at. If you want to sort of delve into it and get a bit more information about that. As I said, Oliver Keiselbach has done some great work on this about decoding Win32 apps. He's also got a deep dive blog on that. But Peter van der Vood, the SC Config Manager guys, and Per Larsen have got some really good blogs about Win32 apps. So definitely worth checking out. Okay, on to BitLocker. Okay, so what I wanted to highlight here really was around the improvements to the BitLocker experience in Intune and Autopilot that have been added recently, particularly around Windows 10 1809 deployment. So previously, by default, devices would be encrypted with the XTS AES 128 algorithm, which isn't the strongest. So with Windows 10 15 11, the 256 algorithm was introduced. So bit of a pain that we couldn't go in and manipulate that until recently, because you can't flip between the two algorithms without decrypting and re-encrypting. So now we can state that 256 from the offset. Windows 10 1809 also introduced silent enforcement on fixed disks. It's a bit of a hidden setting, and I've zoomed into that here on the next screen. If you want to silently deploy to the endpoints, then the option is to block warning for other disk encryption. So bit of a strange bit of wording, but apparently that's based on the original CSP, and that's why it's written in that way. So starting with Windows 10 1809, you can create a BitLocker policy, target a device group, enable Autopilot ESP, which is the enrollment status page, and target the 256 algorithm. So you're getting the best experience now for BitLocker deployment with 1809. So what I want to show you is first off, how you can access those settings, but also how you can look at some extra bits around encryption that are in preview in the portal. So let me bring up the portal. Okay, so in Intune, we need to go into device configuration and into profiles. And we can create a profile here, give it a name. And for platform, we need to choose Windows 10 and later. Under a profile type, we need to choose endpoint protection. And then we've got access to the Windows encryption settings. There's 38 settings available to us. And here you can see all those settings that you saw on the slide there. So we can go in and block that warning for other disk encryption, for example. Once we've set those, we go in and we push those out via an assignment. Okay, one new feature in the portal is a report around the status of our encryption on devices. So we can go in and take a look now. One minute. There we go. Sorry, I missed it. Endpoint encryption, endpoint report preview. Sorry. Now this gives us a full list of devices that are targeted or not targeted. So all the devices in our portal, and here I can see if they are encrypted or not. So this one here, the HP laptop, for example, if I click on that, I can see that's encrypted. It had my BitLocker profile assigned to it, and that succeeded. So I can export all these details out as well into a CSV file. So that's new. Is that only for Windows-based devices? I don't know. I've not got any Mac devices I could test that on, but my assumption is possibly just Windows, but we have got this OS column, so maybe not. I'm not sure. Sorry, I can't say for sure on that. Okay, so that's a new preview report, and hopefully there's going to be some more changes to that and more information pumped in over time. We can also check recovery keys themselves against devices, so admins can go in and gather that information. So we can hop into our devices blade, and if I go into all devices, and pick a particular device, then I've got this recovery keys preview option available to me. So this gives me the key and the recovery key information for that particular device. Now this one is a device that I rebuilt, hence it's got a couple of keys in there. It looks like it stores the old key and retains that. Users themselves have the option to get their own recovery key, and this is available from their Active Directory account page, which you can direct them to. So if I click on my account and go into profile, try again. Yeah, okay. So I get a list of all the devices that are associated against my account. And I can click on here and get the BitLocker key information. So it's in its early stages. It's in its infancy, I feel, but it's slowly bridging the gap there between the cloud and on-prem. It's missing some features that I'm kind of used to with NBAM, for example. If you're familiar with NBAM, it has the ability to rotate a BitLocker key, recovery key, if it's been used. So you get a brand new key for that device, which is, extra secure. And it also kind of role separates as such away from an AD object or an Azure AD object. So that's all the reporting we have at the moment. So that particular report page tells you if it's encrypted or not, and that's all we've got so far. Just answering one of the questions there in the chat window. NBAM has role separation as such. So if you delete an AD object, you'll still have the recovery key information in the NBAM database. So there's there you go. So that slightly, needs a bit more adding to it. Exactly, not enough to pass an audit. Things are improving, and there'll be more features added over time. Okay. Right. So I'm reading the chat messages there. Okay, so on to the third item on the agenda, which is security baselines preview. Now, if you're used to the on-prem approach, what we would tend to do is get the Microsoft security baseline downloaded for our Windows 10 release. Hopefully you're using security baselines against your Windows 10 devices. We take the ADMX and ADML from that download and pump them into the GPO Central store. Finally, we'd import the configured settings. So these settings are already configured with that baseline, and we'd apply them out against our devices. So Intune has recently introduced a preview of security baselines. It works in a different way. The baseline that's available to us isn't version specific as such. It was released back in October. But obviously, if a device does not comply with a certain setting, it just won't apply that. Let me show you how to apply those and how they get added onto a device and where we can look to see them being added. Okay, so back to the Intune portal, we have this security baselines preview option. And as you can see, it's the October 2018 release of that. That hasn't changed, it's still 2018 at the moment from October. I need to create a new profile, give it a name. And then I can pick all the settings that I want. Here's all the different feature sets. I can go through and amend those, or I can just leave the baseline as is. It's pre-configured for me. So here, for example, going back to BitLocker, we can see the 256 algorithm is already default for me, but I could go in and adjust that if I wanted to. On this occasion, I'm just going to leave as is and create that profile. Okay, so if you're not really using Intune much at the moment, you're probably getting used to the fact now that you have to create a profile and assign it out. So here I'm going to assign that particular profile, and I've created again a group for my devices. Okay. Okay, so here's the endpoint. This will sync periodically, but if not, I can force that to sync by going into the sync settings here. But this particular device has already picked up those policies, and you can see that list that relates to what we saw in the security baselines settings drop down. So to take a look at them being applied, we can't use a tool such as RSOP. We don't have that luxury with our sec baselines from Intune. So we have to delve into the event logs, unfortunately, to see what's going on. And this particular device management enterprise diagnostic provider admin log gives us all the details that we need. We need to look for event ID 814. As you can see, just scroll past there, there's quite a chunk of those. So each individual setting records an event ID here. This particular one, when I drill into it, well, this relates to a power management setting.
Paul, have you noticed that would affect login times? These policies?
You say again, Julie?
Have you noticed if these policies, like the more policies you have, does that affect the log on time of the machine?
I haven't noticed any impact at all. No.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty swish. Yeah, that's a good question, because potentially there could be, but these haven't affected at all. So yeah, it's good news in a way. Okay. Well, that covers security baselines. Nice and quick, that one. That's not much more to say on that, really. So I want to delve into.
Go ahead.
Is there a easy way to convert on-prem GPOs to MDM policies?
Good question.
Yes. I believe there are some community tools out there that allow you to do that.
I use MMAT. Yeah, but that just analyzes and then still manual intervention.
Yes.
There's not a way to do like an import export.
There's no way, right?
But you
Yeah.
can at least see what translates.
And so then what happens with the GPOs that are not compatible with that?
Yeah.
So then you
That's-
have to-
Those are the gaps.
We can talk about this a little later.
Oh.
Any other questions in the room before he starts in on Autopilot?
Yeah, so back to the audit reporting. I'm only asking because I'm working with an organization right now that's getting audited for full disk encryption. And they have MBAM, but they are also looking at moving to Intune and Azure. So if the cipher strength, like if it's 128 or 256, and the key type are stored as an Azure AD or on-prem AD property when the machine is encrypted, when it uploads, like in the policy, you tell it to upload its information. If that's stored there, then we should be able to pull that information from Power BI to pull those two reports together, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm hoping that it's really slowly maturing over time. So what we're getting at the moment in the portal is really early days.
Somebody give that kid some growth hormone.
Yeah. It needs some TLC. So over time, will we be able to replace MBAM, get all the information we want from here without having to manipulate? That's the ideal scenario, but we're way off at the moment.
Yep. Thank you.
That's cool. Okay. Shall I carry on, Julie? Are we all good?
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So talking about GPO, we can now use GPO by implementing the hybrid join scenario, which is new and preview and requires you to have Windows 10 1809 as a minimum. So before I kickstart this, I just wanted to give a shout out to a friend of mine in the community, a chap called Steve Beaumont. We ran this back in February at our Windows Management User Group event in London, and Steve and myself co-presented, and he has done the demo for this section. So I want to give him a kudos for doing that. And Steve is CTO of a company in the UK called Power On Platforms, and is a former cloud and data center management MVP. So I want to make sure he gets the recognition for the demo. He also did the slides, and I've tweeted these as well. So, okay. Excuse me. So what do we mean by hybrid join? Well, effectively, our Windows 10 device will join and register with Azure AD, but it will also join our on-premise Active Directory as well. So we can take advantage of things like our GPO set and use those on the devices. That helps businesses who may be looking to slowly transition to the cloud, and allows them to carry on as normal until they can move technology away and get themselves in a good space for modern management. How is it achieved? Basically, Intune will use what's called an on-premise Intune Connector, and it'll create an offline domain join blob for the device that will be provided to the device during its enrollment. Okay. Quite a few, excuse me, there's quite a few building blocks here and prereqs. So compared to the other things that we've demoed, a bit more involved. So I'll call those out. We need hybrid AD join and configured and in place. We therefore require Azure AD premium licenses. Our devices, as I say, must be running Windows 10, 18, 9 and above. These devices must have internet access. But the key thing here is they must have direct access to our AD. So we can't be going to Starbucks and unboxing in the cafe and autopiloting. We can't be doing this on our home Wi-Fi, for example, and VPN scenarios aren't supported either. So direct access to AD required. Automatic enrollment must be configured in our portal. So our devices enroll automatically. And we must also make sure that our Azure AD Connect is configured correctly for this scenario as well. And I'll run through each of these briefly. And as I say, there's a new feature, the Intune Connector, that's going to do a lot of the legwork here. The Intune Connector must be delegated out permissions in AD to create computer objects. It must be running Windows 2016 or later, and it must have internet connectivity as well, in particular to the Intune service. Okay. So as I say, we need to configure auto enrollment for our devices and make sure that our settings here aren't set to none. We must at least have some or all our users able to enroll devices. I'll show you where that is in the portal if you're not aware. Okay. So in Intune, we're going to go into the device enrollment blade under Windows Enrollment. And here we've got the automatic enrollment option. And you'll see here those settings that we saw on the slide. As I mentioned, we need to delegate out some domain join permissions for our server object that's going to run the Intune connector. So hopefully you're familiar with delegating out permissions in AD. If not, you need to right-click on the OU that you want to join the domains into, the devices into, sorry, and add in the computer object, and then go through the process here of delegating out. So we'll create a custom task, and we will allow only the following objects in the folder: computer objects, and create and delete selected objects in this folder. You see that in the image there. On the next screen, we would give full control, and that will give full control to that device, that OU and sub-OUs. Okay, so the Azure AD Connect tool, it's worth reconfiguring this if you're running an older release. I think it's on about version 1.5 something or other now at the moment, but the minimum requirement is to run version 1.1.819.0 to configure hybrid Azure AD join. We have to make sure that the service connection point is configured. Let me zoom into this for you. And as you can see there, it states that the SCP is used to by the devices to discover Azure AD tenancy information. It also states if you've got different forests, each forest needs its own SCP. And if you haven't got enterprise admin details to add in there, then you'll need to download the PS1 file and run that independently. You will be prompted for credentials when you configure this. It's worth noting there that you must ensure that the OU that you've defined in your setup already is in scope for the sync. So the Intune connector, as I say, this is the new feature doing a lot of the grunt work here. it's a really simple tool to install. As I mentioned, you must be running this on a 2016 server and above. Steve added this little comment in that he noted that some people had better success running this on 2019 server, but I had no problems at all in the testing that I've done so far with 2016. When you come to install this tool and sign into it, you must be signing in with an account that's a global admin or is an Intune admin, and it must have an assigned Intune license to that account. One thing I noted was that when you do attempt to sign in, you must have IE protected mode turned off in Server Manager. Otherwise, you can't complete the authentication process. Okay, so how do we get hold of the Intune connector? Right, okay, we can get this from the portal itself. Again, back under device enrollment and Windows enrollment, we have the Intune Connector AD preview. Click on that. Okay. So these are erroring because I don't think my device is online at the moment. But if I click Add, I can download the connector. And this connector bootstrapper exit can take off and install on my server that I'm going to install the connector onto. Okay, so let me fire that device up. Nice here. Okay. So I've gone through the process here of installing this connector and then signing in, and it reports back as that connector is enrolled. And then what happens next is it might take a couple of minutes to appear in the Intune portal, but where you saw where I had the error at the moment, reporting as with an error, it would normally report there as active. It will only appear, by the way, if it can successfully communicate with the Intune service. I think I missed a question there on the chat window. If you can...
Yeah, I was just asking how many connectors for an enterprise? You just need the one, or would you recommend maybe two for some redundancy in case one data center goes down, kind of a thing?
Yeah, you can add in multiple, so that, yeah, that's possibly a good way of dealing with it.
And then there's another follow-up. So if we're using Azure AD Connect now to synchronize between on-prem and Azure Active Directory, is the functionality of the Intune connector eventually going to be rolled into that, or are they going to keep it separate?
I'm not sure, but this is performing a slightly different task in that it's the role that's creating the on-prem object, the offline object, and then passing information back through to Intune. So yeah, it potentially could be rolled into it, but at the moment
it's all backed by Azure AD, even if you just have an Intune subscription.
Yeah. There's potential for that to happen, for sure.
Oh, that's a good question. So Brandon Cleland has one there about can it be installed in the same server as the AAD connector?
I would say yes, but I haven't tried it. Yeah, I don't know for sure if that can happen, but I couldn't see why not. They are performing different tasks. Give it a go and see, I think is the key, yeah.
The mad scientist needs to fire up his lab.
I've not read anything that says you can't. The prereqs, they're stating you just run it on these particular OS and these requirements, but nothing saying do not install if the AAD Connect is running. So yeah, give it a shot. Okay. Event-wise, I'm gonna crack open Event Viewer. The The offline domain join connector service. Let's throw up a few errors for me now. Typically, it wasn't earlier because I'm demoing it, it's showing errors. But on the event ID, we need to look for event ID 30140 in this particular log, and that will show a successful creation of computer objects. Don't know what the event ID is for a non-successful attempt. Unfortunately, I've not got any of those event IDs in this log as well. It doesn't go back far enough to show me that. Okay. So yeah, as soon as it flows into the portal, we should see that as active. Ignore my errors for now. Okay, so what else do we need to do? There's a few things we need to do around domain join itself and also around Autopilot deployment. So first up, we'll need to create a domain join profile. And here you can see that we're going to specify the domain name, but also the OU. So that's the OU we've delegated out rights to. We can specify a computer name prefix, as you can see there. However, anything post that prefix is just randomized characters, so you can't control any of that, unfortunately. Let me show you where that is. In Intune, going to device configuration, profiles, create a profile, and it's a Windows 10 or later. And we have this domain join preview profile type, and there you can see the 3 options that we can fill in. We also need to create an Autopilot deployment profile that is of a type that allows for hybrid join. Okay. Again, this is in the Windows Enrollment under Device Enrollment. And we need to go into our deployment profiles. Hopefully you're familiar with Autopilot or you've had a little play with this so far. If we create a profile, we get the option here to do hybrid Azure AD join. We push those out to any devices that we want to provision with Autopilot, and there's some good blogs out there around creating dynamic groups for your Autopilot devices, and I've linked to one of those in the slides at the end. One thing we'll need to do is ensure that we have our enrollment status page set. Again, you can just go in and set this for, I set it for all users and all devices. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to run the final demo here. This takes us through the Autopilot provisioning stage and shows you how it appears into the on-prem AD and then finally adds into our Azure AD. So first off, we're just proving that at the moment, there's nothing in the domain itself, the blank OU. Now with Autopilot, we're just going through the OOP stage. We type in our preferred keyboard layout, and then the device goes through. We've uploaded hardware hash information for the device into the portal, assign that to the profile. As you can see, it recognizes this device as being one of ours, and I can log in here with my Azure AD credentials. Now, even though this is speeded up, it still takes forever to go through this process. So this initiates a restart. And behind the scenes, the Intune Connector has been doing a bit of its work and weaving its magic. And if we refresh this OU now, we can see we have a device in our on-prem AD. It's still not provisioned in Azure AD. That's going to happen as part of the enrollment status page process. And what Steve was attempting to do here was show that no matter what we search for, it's just not going to appear at the moment. I think he tries quite a few times to do this. Okay, it has enrolled via MDM, so that's appeared, but we're still waiting for it to drop into the Azure AD. Doesn't matter how many times he refreshes it, it's not going to happen. Okay, but on the device itself, we're presented with an on-prem login, which we're all familiar with, and it's got the domain there, the power on domain. So we log in with the AD credentials at this stage. Now, if I was clever, I would have used GPO to turn this off, but and it would have taken effect at this point. So it's going to go through the first time sign-in animation. Okay, and now we have the enrollment status page kicking in. I think there's a bit of a pause here, so let me jog this on a little bit. Okay, so if you click show details, you see here, joining your organization's network. It's still working on that process. That's because it hasn't registered as yet in the Azure AD. Now, in my lab, I had some real issues with my Azure AD Connect as well, and it'd been locked up for quite a while, and I just decided to try and fix it to get this working. It timed out for me at this point. So I reconfigured the whole thing and got it working. Okay, so there's a few sign-ins required here. At this stage, you have to sign in with your Azure AD details. I can imagine this process could be quite frustrating for end users as well, the number of times you have to keep authenticating. Okay, now this is reporting back as complete for joining the organization's network. So at this point, I should be able to flip back to my portal and see the device in Azure AD. Okay, here we go, we're on the desktop now. Let me just click through, there's a lot of stuff here that's unnecessary. Okay, so back to the portal, and we can refresh, and we have now got our device reporting back in Azure AD. You'll get two instances of the device, one reporting Azure AD and one as hybrid, and that's normal. Okay, so that device is successfully joined to both our directories. Okay, a bunch of resources again for you to take a look at. A lot of content here from the official Microsoft documentation. Hopefully that blogs.technet link will work now, based on what all the changes that have been happening. So that concludes the presentation for tonight. Any questions?
There was one in the chat that Phil had about it. Is this the Intune Connector supported on core server?
I don't think it is. No, I'm not. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
This was great. I learned some stuff. What do you guys think here in the room? You got some head nodding, light bulbs going on.
That's cool. Yeah.
Oh, question in the back.
So, just want a clarification. Did you say hybrid join only works if you have direct access to the on-prem domain?
So the question is, hybrid
Yes.
join only works, and that's when you're going from Intune to your domain. Only works with
Yeah,
direct.
so you need a direct line of sight to your AD. Yeah. So you can't run this, as I say, on your home Wi-Fi. VPN isn't supported. You've got to be able to talk to the domain controllers from your device you're provisioning.
So I think there's still some gaps for a lot of organizations.
Yeah.
But I think it's clear where they want to take the product, right?
Yes. Yes. It's a nice starter. I find it's, you know, it's preview, it's new, it's just come out a few months ago, and again, like the BitLocker side of things, you know, there's going to be improvements along the way. It's just we're right at the start of that particular roadmap for this feature.
Other questions? Oh wait, here's a question in the chat. Who are you pulling for in the EPL?
Right, for anyone who
Come
doesn't
on,
know,
mate, don't stutter now.
well, I don't support any team that's in the Premier League. My team is in the 3rd tier. My team is a team called Barnsley. But I have in my house one of my sons and my brother-in-law, who we look after, who's Down syndrome. They both support Liverpool, and my wife is.
Go Reds!
Yeah, and my wife
never
is,
walk alone. That is my team.
Well, my wife supports Man City and has done for years.
It's okay. We all have our faults.
But I hope Liverpool win, to be honest. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I am a huge Reds fan.
Yeah. It's interesting. And by the way, that's not my house on the screen. if you're wondering.
Well played, mate. Well, great presentation. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
really
cheers.
Insightful.
Thank you. Hopefully it was of interest. And there, as I say, there's a lot of new things happening. Microsoft, as Julie will be fully aware, always looking for feedback on these sort of things. So you know, feedback to them as much as possible, really.
Right. The only thing that I would add, you know, when you were talking about security compliance baselines, that same kind of reverse engineering of pulling in, you know, the group policy, admin files, you know, you can do the exact same thing in an SCCM environment, right? And be able to import those, or still using, you know, the security compliance manager 4.0. You know, that thing still has legs. It may have been sunset, but you could still use that to capture all the default settings. And Microsoft is saying this is a secure Win10 deployment, and be able to extract that as a cab file, pull it into a compliance baseline, then target a collection that has your sample, your gold image, right? And be able to immediately see the delta between what Microsoft is saying is a hardened image versus what you're deploying out there or about to deploy, and you know, make that call. You know, do you want to make modifications or take it as it is?
Yeah. So it's on the roadmap. I know there was questions around, you know, being able to bring things in. It is on the roadmap. We had the Intune guys over in London back in October, And they said, yeah, at the moment you've got to use what we've got there. You can manipulate those settings, but to bring your own baseline in, it's on the roadmap. So hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have that luxury to do that. On the reporting side, what I noticed, so there's a few bugs around it. As I say, it's preview. A lot of this stuff is preview. My device was reporting some errors around the baselines that I'd applied, even though they show as successful on the device itself in the event logs. So again, you know, it's preview. We expect that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. But really good job, man. Great.
Cool. Okay.
I think there was one other question early on that we skipped over, and that was, are there any good books to learning Intune or going deeper in Intune?
Oh. Do you know what? Books are great, but in this ever-changing world, are they still as relevant as they used to be?
Yeah.
You know, even with Config Manager, you know, you could get a good book like Config Manager Unleashed or something like that, where it gives you the details and the hardcore information about the setup and configuration of Config Manager. But because they're changing so rapidly, they date so quickly. So I think really for Intune, just get on the TechNet documentation and use that and just read all that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the word good with a book right now with these types of Azure, any Azure technology, it's just futile. It's so much lead time to get an actual paper book published that the product has gone through many iterations.
Yeah.
So,
It's hard enough to
Microsoft.
keep up with it, isn't it? You know,
Oh, yes.
never mind writing a book at the same time to then,
Well,
it's out of date.
Just to interject for a moment, if I may. So, you know, Don Jones is one of the world's premier experts on PowerShell and incorporating it into all types of environments, including Azure, Intune, etc. He's also one of the best-selling authors on LeanPub, LeanPub.com. Now, the difference between what Julie just said with print publications, yes, the technology changes so rapidly, there's no way a print book could possibly keep up. But in Don Jones's books that he's published through LeanPub, these are actually living volumes, and you get notified as soon as he's added a new chapter, revised an existing book, etc. So it's kind of like these living Bibles around things like security, Active Directory, Azure, PowerShell, etc. So definitely check that out as a resource to go to for learning as well.
Yep,
Yeah, I mean, around the Intune space, a lot of the MVP guys, guys and gals, I'd check out Oliver Keiselbach as a link to his blog. The SC Config Manager guys, Peter van der Vood, Per Larsen, people like that really. I've got a Keep It Simple with Intune series that I kickstarted around Christmas time on the SCCM Mentor website, which is, you know, really intro stuff for you to kind of get used to stuff like this. You know, how to deploy the BitLocker encryption, for example, how to publish a start menu. But there's a lot of community stuff out there. I'd rather use the web than a book these days.
Other questions? All right, well, I think this about wraps it up. I'll do one last roll call. Anybody who is here in the room or, oh, did I miss a question?
That was me.
Oh, go ahead.
Put it in the chat, though.
Oh,
I'm not sure if you can hear me, but
okay.
I have a customer going hybrid Azure join as well. And what's happening is that you successfully enrolled on a machine, showing in Auto as SCCM manager. And with that date of 1900. Which they mentioned they never had SCCM involved in their environment, so forward to getting them. Sure if you came across those over there.
So Paul, I don't know if you've seen that in the chat.
Yeah, that looks really bizarre.
Kind of court case open, so it's still open.
Yeah, I've not seen that. I would, yeah, let Microsoft know. That looks really strange, doesn't it?
Yep.
1900, yeah. Crazy.
It's like the Y2K glitch.
Yeah.
I remember those days.
Oh, I feel like Windows 7 end of life is like Y2K. It's crazy at the minute. People shifting over, and rightly so that we are moving that way. But it's a busy time.
For sure. So just a quick roll call, people on the call or here in the room. Anybody going to the conference next month, the MMS MOA, Minnesota? Yep. All right. We got 2 here.
Yes, with no
Upstairs?
ticket.
There's a couple in the chat as well. Unfortunately, I will not be able to make it this year. Conflicting
So,
engagements.
all right. Well, Paul, we are so thankful for you to take your late night evening and spend it with us. And
that's cool.
Really do appreciate it. But we will let you go and get some sleep. And
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Oh, well, thanks ever so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. So enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right.
Thank you.
There you go. But thanks, Paul. Have a
Cheers
great
now.
evening.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bedtime for me. Bye.